On this International Women's Day, I want to begin by remembering and honouring Emily Wilding Davison. Emily was born in 1872 and she is one of the most well-known of the English suffragettes. She was arrested on 9 occasions. She went on hunger strike 7 times. She died after being hit by King George V's horse at the 1913 Derby. No one knows if she deliberately threw herself under the horse or whether, for example, she was trying to hang a suffragette flag onto the horse's bridle and slipped and went under the horse. We don't know. But what we do know, what is certain, is that she fought with her heart and soul for the right of women to have the vote. She is buried in the churchyard of St Mary the Virgin, Morpeth. On her gravestone is inscribed deeds, not words.
I'm standing here in front of the grave of Emily Wilding Davison, buried here in Morpeth, and of a Morpeth family, although she grew up and was educated in London. I'm standing here wearing suffragette clothes, carrying a scarf given to me by Helen Pankhurst, the great-granddaughter of Emmeline Pankhurst. I've got a badge on me, amongst the many, which is of Millicent Fawcett, one of the most prominent women in the choice to fight for the vote for women. I'm also wearing something belonging to my grandmother, who married at the age of 43 and died in 1983. These women are all our ancestors, all in different ways made a choice to challenge the world of their time. Millicent through debate, through lobbying, through writing. Emmeline, Emily and the suffragettes by direct action. My grandma by defying convention. I'm also wearing some bracelets in the suffragette colours, which were made by women in communities in South Africa. One of those communities introduced me to the most amazing woman I've ever met, who chose to challenge a Saracen tank. She was about 4'8" in height, and I met her well after apartheid in a township just outside Cape Town, Kailishta. And I was asking what had changed for her. And she said, I'm free. And I asked her when she really felt that, expecting her to say the change after apartheid. And she said, in 1976, when I stood in front of a Saracen tank in the middle of the township. And I knew I was free because I challenged everything it stood for. And they could have killed me, and actually they didn't. that was actually awesome and completely blew me away.
Today is a celebration for women all around the world, ladies who've dared to dream big ever since they were little girls. For the diversity and the talents that lie within feminine heart, for the courage and the determination that prevents us from falling apart. We can raise families and build businesses and be proud of all we've achieved, when once over visions of that scale could never have been believed. Ladies, stand up and be counted, smile at how far we've come, and cherish every single day as daughter, wife, companion, or mum. Don't let anybody tell you that there are set of paths for you to follow. As little girls with passion, is an inspiring woman of tomorrow. So celebrate all women and acknowledge the great things they do, and tell a lady close to your heart just how much she means to you.
Thank you, Gracie, for reading that. It really portrays what this day is for, to celebrate women, our achievements, our courage, and our determination. The 21st century has seen a new era of women, but we cannot forget the fight that women have had for centuries before us to get us where we are today. Bishop Christine spoke of some of the women from Northumberland that took that fight across the UK, inspiring many to do the same for years afterwards. And because of them, we have seen change. And it is for them I have laid a wreath today in remembrance. We are proud to say we have a strong leadership, political representation, and workforce of women here at the Council and across our partner organisations in Northumberland. It shows what can be achieved and helps us to further break down gender bias. This year has been particularly challenging for all, for those mothers who have been at home working and teaching, for those who have not only had to care for their own families, but care for another too, those who live alone and have had to find new ways to connect, for those younger women in our county who have had to learn a new way at home to do their best ability to further their learning. And for those who have continued to support us on the front line as critical key workers. I applaud each and every one of you for your determination. You are and continue to be amazing. But we must also remember those inspirational women who have been lost in the past year, and take a moment to think about the families, daughters, mothers, and grandmothers who have been lost and who have lost loved ones. In a year where we have all been challenged, I hope women are proud of themselves for what they have already achieved and are inspired to challenge and to go for what they aspire for in life. Learning from those women before us and who have inspired us leads me on to the importance of including our youngest residents in these celebrations. It is important that we teach our children and young people why equality matters at the earliest opportunity. So as part of International Women's Day, we asked our schools to get involved in a series of competitions which helped them reflect on inspirational women and how they have played a role in where we are today. Through art, poetry, storytelling, design, and writing, these young people have shown us exactly how they have been inspired. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of those who took part in the competitions. You have not only inspired yourselves, but also us here at the Council. Thank you very much. We will now hear from some of the winning schools and pupils.
Hi, my name's Sarah Routledge and I'm one of the assistant heads at Ponteland High School. Over the last 2 years, we've been involved in participating in a number of the initiatives that have been offered from Northumberland County Council to celebrate International Women's Day. We've entered the art competition, the short story competition, and we've put forward nominations for the Inspirational Woman Award as well. It's so important for our students to be able to be involved in these wider initiatives, to do more than just kind of come to school, but also to be recognised for their contributions more widely. And it's really lovely that they've been able to be part of this celebration, particularly in the last 2 years. We've had loads of entrants for the competitions and nominations as well. And it's lovely that some of our winners are able to be recognised for their amazing talents, their amazing contributions, and just being fantastic students in our school, but also in the community of Northumberland as well.
My name is Emily McKenna and I go to Ponteland High School sixth form. Being nominated for this award is an amazing achievement, and then to win is so unexpected, but I'm very grateful to be recognised as inspiring. I'm so lucky to love doing what I do, and I'm so privileged to be able to do it. The charity work and the volunteering means I can use my experiences and enthusiasm to help others and to support them in so many different ways. I especially enjoyed seeing the young people at Vulnerability overcome challenges and to watch them improve physically and mentally. The netball club and the rowing courses provided me with an opportunity to watch the children grow in confidence and to participate in a brand new sport. To me, being inspirational means influencing people to always do their best and to never give up. I believe that anyone can overcome challenges with a little bit of support and motivation as long as they're smiling.
Hi, I'm Polly Reid from Ponteland High School, and even just to be recognised by the teachers for my hard work and achievements felt incredible in itself, but to be nominated and to win the Inspiring Young Woman Award was just amazing. Even to have the opportunities I had to inspire people, like coaching young adults with disabilities and helping at the local primary school, was just such a positive and fulfilling experience that I'm just grateful for the opportunity.
So as an art department, we really wanted to nominate Pia for the Young Inspirational Woman Award because of her creative work and then using those skills entrepreneurially to raise funds for the community. And it was really inspiring for me to learn about that as a teacher, that you've done that and you run an initiative, and to share that with other pupils to inspire them, to work creatively and also engage in community development, really. Well done, Pia, for your success on the International Women's Day Award.
Thank you.
Because you won the Inspirational Young Woman Award, didn't you? And also the Arts Award for your Grace Darling painting.
Yeah.
Really lovely drawing to start with, and then beautiful colours that you've used.
Yeah, I used the watercolour and I did it a couple of times. I did a few sketches, and this one turned out good.
Okay. And what inspired you to create this piece of work?
I was looking at women from Northumberland, and then I remembered Grace Darling because, she's really amazing how she was so young when she had to save these people from near where her lighthouse was where she lived.
Beautiful, fantastic work. Well done.
Hello, I'm Mrs. Whiting and I'm the head of English at Berwick Middle School. I just wanted to say how very proud I am of our Year 8 student, Ebba, who has won the short story competition which was organised by NCC for International Women's Day. It's really fantastic that competitions like this are organised to bring to the fore the struggles and the achievements of women over time. I think it helps our pupils to be reminded that things weren't always the same for women and for men, and that there is still progress that needs to be made. This competition asked for a strong female character, and Ebba had several of those in her story. It was a really fantastic story, and I was so proud when I saw what she had written.
Sound control. Marie stared unbelievingly at her test results. Peering sideways across the room, she noted her friend Izzy's furrowed brow, indicating equally depressing figures. The bell sounded and chairs scraped noisily over the scuffed wooden floor like nails on blackboards as the girls hurried out to the playing field with its spectacular view over Lord's Mount, across Magdalen Fields and out to the North Sea. All except Marie, waiting around the corner till Miss Cleghorn left. She crept back into the classroom. She made her way towards the back, where Collegie's desk sagged under the weight of books, papers, and confiscated items, and rifled through their most recent test scores until she found her name, Abernethy M. Snatching a red fountain pen from a pot, she hastily drew 2 curved lines, rapidly transforming her score of E into a reasonable B. On second thought, she added a small plus and was about to edit Izzy's atrocious F when she heard footsteps echoing down the corridor. Marie ducked behind the table just as 2 figures entered the classroom. Carefully, Marie raised her eyes high enough over the desk to see 2 strangers through a gap in the wall of school books and jotters. There was a man and a woman dressed in dark, stiff-looking uniforms, the former tall and burly with unnaturally blonde hair. The woman was fairly short, with very long, dark hair, which seemed to shine with its blackness. The woman set a heavy green metal case on the floor. Printed on the side in white lettering was warning, handle contents with extreme caution. Marie noticed an unusual motif printed on the breast pocket of their jackets, matched on the case. The deep green uniforms buttoned to the throat. The case, the shiny, long black boots, the gold insignia and medals, all combined in Maria's mind and caused panic to rise in her throat. Marie watched as the pair rummaged in the case, removing various odd-looking medical items, including an enormous syringe, and laid them in a neat row on the first desk, where Maggie McConnell normally sat. Looking at her bulky wristwatch, the woman said in her clipped voice, "There are 5 minutes left of their recess. We had better get your case to the other classroom where you will perform the procedure on the boys." With that, they strutted out of the classroom. Marie crawled out from underneath the desk and crept to the front of the room to view the paraphernalia left in such sublime order. Alongside was a list of names, all of the girls in Berwick Middle School, alphabetically written in harsh Gothic script. At least half of the names were marked off. Using the red fountain pen, which she still had in hand, she marked a tick in each box next to her and Izzy's names and fled from the room. Running outside into the playground, she pulled Izzy aside to tell her everything she had seen and heard. "I tell you, there's something weird happening. I think they're going to inject us." "They sound like army officials or something," said Izzy thoughtfully. "Why are they here?" "I don't know, but let's find out," murmured Marie as the bell rang. Izzy and Marie lined up at the very back of the queue and quietly slid away as the other girls filed in. They crept into the toilets, locking themselves into the furthest cubicle to ponder the mystery facing them. Who were the mysterious couple? What did they mean by procedure? Why on earth hadn't their mums mentioned anything about a vaccination? The 2 intrepid girls met up at school again in the dead of night to unearth what had happened that afternoon. The first unusual thing they noticed was a large gleaming car with the same strange insignia embossed on the bonnet, parked in a spot usually reserved for Mr. Plonks, a sleepy headmaster. Just then, a group of figures marched in through the school gates. In a panic, Marie and Izzy pressed themselves against a tree to hide. They were coming closer. Izzy squeezed her eyes shut. Marie, daring to peek, saw their classmates. What was Susan, Hetty, Tina, Sandy, and Bruce doing here at this time? They walked past silently, stiffly, with expressionless faces. as though they were under a spell. Then this was normally the greatest, giggliest, girliest gang in Northumberland. Marie nudged Izzy, who pried open her eyes. "Look," she whispered, as the party strode towards the school entrance. "What's wrong with them?" asked Izzy. "Follow my lead," instructed Marie as she dragged Izzy by the hand, and it fell in line behind the 5 girls, the pair imitating their robotic movements and blank expressions. The school interior was unrecognisable. The corridors were full of wooden crates. The classrooms were noisy with industry. Children were busy hammering, sawing, chopping, packing, carrying. The strangers from the classroom were supervising. A high-pitched whining sound cut through the air, piercing to Marie and Izzy. The man and woman continued to speak in hushed tones, apparently oblivious to the noise. It made Marie's eyes water. The 2 girls followed their 5 friends, who now stood blankly in the centre of the hall. The 2 terrible officers barked at them. "You 7 are late. Get to work packing the dynamite that the Year 5s are making into the crates. Now!" Immediately, the 5 pivoted as one, closely followed by Marie and Izzy, into the corridor carrying armfuls of explosives. Once they were away from the gaze of the guards, Marie pinched Rose, but there was no reaction, not even from a kick. "It must have been the injection. I knew there was something awful in it," muttered Marie to Izzy. "They're behaving like puppets, bent to the will of those creeps. I think this awful screeching has summoned them and is keeping them compliant. Maybe if we stop it, they will wake up?" "I don't understand why the adults can't hear it, though," said Izzy. "Maybe the frequency is too high. Adults can't hear over a certain pitch. We've got to do something, Izzy." And with that, the girls leant in and concocted a plan. Marie crept into her classroom and spotted the green case, just where she hoped it would be. Rooting around, she soon found an enormous syringe filled with a violent pink liquid. She grabbed it and headed back towards the hall. As she crept down the dark corridor, scarcely breathing, she was spotted by the uniformed woman. "Get back to your station, you filthy vermin," she ordered. Marie coolly walked up to her, and, to the woman's utter amazement, swiftly jabbed the needle into her arm and ran. As Marie burst through the hall doors, shrieks from the woman rang through the air. The man turned his blonde head to witness Marie and her crazed pursuer hurtling towards him. She deftly inserted the syringe into the man's outstretched hand. What was happening? The pair of adults seemed merely enraged, not catatonic like the children. Something had gone to plan, though. Instead of an ear-piercing whine, the only noise now was startled children waking up from their collective nightmare. Marie smiled and ran, pursued by the furious adults, through a sea of confused children. Through a maze of corridors which she knew so well, she began to outdistance the strangers, ducking and weaving until she found herself in the car park next to Izzy. Panting, she said to Izzy, "Well done, it worked. Turning up a siren freed the children from the trance." "Great," exclaimed Izzy. "What about the injections?" "Didn't go quite so well," said Marie, just as the 2 bedraggled maniacs burst through the front doors, wildly scanning for the offenders. "What will we do now? They've gone Raj!" shouted Izzy. "Get in the car, quick!" yelled Marie. And the girls slammed the doors just as the wild-eyed lunatics leapt onto the bonnet. "Make it go!" screamed Izzy. "I don't know how!" Marie howled as the man, needle still protruding jauntily from his palm, banged on the windscreen. "Press everything!" Izzy bubbled, whilst the women, immaculate black hair now more like a heap of dead ravens, clawed at the handles, frantically punching every button in sight. Marie heard the engine roar into life. Immediately the woman's arms slackened and dropped to her sides, her face, so recently livid, blank as a white wall. The man slithered off the roof of the car, like a puppet with the strings cut, and stood peacefully in front of the 2 stunned girls. "The engine noise?" wondered Marie. "It must be just the right pitch to make the adults comply," breathed Izzy. A strange sight met the barrack town constable as he looked out of the station's kitchenette onto the normally peaceful Church Street. 2 dilapidated figures, chaperoned by 2 schoolgirls, driving a beautiful, shining automobile. Bringing up the rear was a train of 200 or more smudgy-looking, cheering children.
Grace was born in 1815. Her father was a lighthouse keeper, and they spent much of her childhood on Longstone Island, the lighthouse there. In the early hours of the 7th of September, 1838, when Grace was 22, she was looking out of her bedroom window onto a terribly stormy scene and saw that a ship had foundered on a nearby rocky outcrop and had broken in half. Grace could see the shipwreck and just a few survivors there. It was too dangerous and too stormy for the Sea House's lighthouse to come out, so Grace and her father went out in this tiny, quite small rowing boat, only 21 feet long. And as Grace's father rescued 4 men, the lone woman survivor, Grace kept that rowing boat stable and steady in that stormy sea. Tremendous courage and seamanship. Grace sadly died at the young age of 26 with tuberculosis. She's buried in the churchyard of St Aidan, Bamborough.
My name is Isabella Curry and I was born on the 12th of January 1921 in Gateshead, now part of Tyne and Wear. My family were originally from the northern part of Northumberland near the Scottish borders and worked on the farms there. Indeed, there are still some Currys who still live in Northumberland as tenant farmers. My grandfather, James Curry, came to Gateshead in the early 1890 and established a butcher's shop which was supplied by his farming relatives and contacts in Northumberland. Later, during the Depression in the 1920s and 30s, I remember rabbits being sent from Northumberland on a special lorry down to his shop to be butchered and sold. My grandfather, who I never met, died young in 1900, aged 42, and the shop was run by my grandmother and helped by my uncle. My father, Tom Curry, then established a baker's shop nearby on Sunderland Road in Gateshead. My father, Tom, was invalided out of the First World War after suffering from the effects of being wounded. I had 2 uncles who I never knew, both of which died in the war aged 21 and 20 years old. He was never informed about his injuries except on the one occasion he was invited to be a subject of a medical lecture by a consultant at the RVI. Whilst during the lecture, the audience in the auditorium were informed about the amount of shrapnel that had been removed from his back, he then only realised the extent of his injuries. My uncle's butcher's shop, along with his and my father's house, was a compulsory purchase prior to the Second World War by Gateshead Council for £75 to make way for the A1 road to be built. The shop was also their homes, and my parents had to move into a council house because they could not afford to buy a house with the money they had been given. My father continued to suffer the effects of his injuries, and he died of young age, 58, in 1948. During the Second World War, my father acted as an air raid warden, of which I also assisted to. For the rest of my life, I lived with a sister, Dorothy, who also never married, and our mother. My other sister and brother married and had family. My mother suffered from dementia in her later years, was largely confined to a bed for the last 10 years of her life, and she died in 1967. My sister Dorothy and I cared for her, and I remember our local GP advising us not to give up work to care for her, because that would be bad for our mental well-being, something that is widely referred to today. And even if it took all of our wages to pay for support, we should still go to work rather than stay at home. During the 60s, it was largely expected that women would stay at home to care for the elderly, so this was a radical step advised by our GP. I worked in a local garage and then in the wages department of the Gateshead Council. Dorothy was a librarian, eventually rising to be deputy head librarian by the time she retired in 1986. We did the best we could while caring for our mother. We even got involved in the campaign for rights of single people acting as carers. My sister and I wrote to the Reverend Mary Webster in 1964 when we heard about her campaign for single people's rights acting as carers, and she used her experience of caring for our mother as an example case where single women who had to give up their work for elderly parents received no allowance or had to pay for a carer out of their own earnings. Her campaign successfully created the National Council for Single Women and Her Dependents, which later became Carers UK. This ultimately culminated in the introduction of the Dependent Relative Tax Allowance in 1967 and the introduction of Invalid Care Allowance in 1976. My sister and I were presented with a certificate by Rev Mary in recognition of our assistance to the cause. Being single and happily living with my sister Dorothy meant that we were both free to travel a lot in retirement, and we also spent many happy times at the theatre. We both visited post-war Germany in 1954, visiting a cousin whose husband was in the RAF serving there, and we saw the post-war devastation, and later visiting my nephews in the 80s and 90s who had also served in the army and RAF there. We visited both Berlin while the war was up, and immediately after the war came down, finally liberating that country. We had a small car, a Morris Minor, which Dorothy drove, and the loss of her ability to drive due to old age curtailed our travels. My nephew Neil and his wife take us to a cottage that they rent in Northumberland in July every year in Outchester, and we spend the time reminiscing of my youth in the county. I tell them all about the times we used to visit Coldstream and the surrounding area. We had relatives working on farms at Shellake, Gasbeal, Cornhill and the Wooler area. I also remember an aunt who worked on the toll on the River Till, and I remembered long evenings listening to the fishermen on the River Tweed and the discussions and arguments over rights and wrongs of the removal of the Stone of the Scone from Westminster. Of course, living on the border, this was a hot topic in 1950. My nieces and nephews are all widely dispersed throughout the UK and Germany, so 2020 has been a struggle during the COVID-19 pandemic. But I have a friend/carer, currently local Noreen Hutchinson, who visits me and does my shopping and general household chores, and whose husband Jim kindly does also gardening and general house repairs whenever required. I recently received a vaccine for COVID-19 and I am looking forward to 2021 being a year in which I may be able to travel again in Northumberland and enjoy the fine weather and scenery and take in visits from family.
The third extraordinary woman I want to remember today on this International Women's Day is Josephine Butler, not quite as well known as Grace Darling, I think. She was born just a little later than Grace Darling, 1828, and she was born up near the borders, fairly near Wooler, and she was, for the whole of her life, a real campaigner. She campaigned for the right of women to vote, this is really quite early on, to have an education, and most especially, Josephine Butler campaigned to end the terrible incidents of child prostitution that was happening at that time. She was married to a Church of England clergyman. They had 4 children. But again, incredibly sadly, the youngest of those children, Ava, died after falling from a banister. And that was a turning point for Josephine. And she channeled the grief she was feeling into action. And she wanted to make a difference. And she fought so fiercely for the rights of children to a safe life, and the end in particular to the slave trade of young women and children that was being sent over to the continent for prostitution. Her efforts led to a change in the law, which raised the age of consent from 13 to 16. At the end of her life, she returned to Northumberland and lived in Wooler, and she is buried in the churchyard at Kirk Newton. I have a hope that when we're allowed to spread ourselves far and wide at the end of our lockdown, that you might be encouraged to do a churchyard trail, visiting the graves of these extraordinary women, Grace in Bamborough, Josephine in Kirk Newton, and Emily in Morpeth. And I hope that you might be inspired by the way that they did not allow themselves to be defined by the expectations of the role of women in their time. They blew that apart, and they dedicated their lives in different ways to make a change, to make a difference. They chose to challenge the accepted wisdom and restrictions that women suffered at the time. Above all, I hope that, particularly if you're a younger person or child listening to this, watching this, that you will be inspired not to let anyone define you. You will not suffer anyone to define you, to limit you, and that you will commit yourselves to becoming fully the person that you have it in you to be, and to fight for the right of others to become the people fully that they are intended to be, or as I would strongly believe God created them to be. The sky is your limit. Please go with joy and fly.
I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all women across Northumberland for all their contributions. Happy International Women's Day to you all.